The smell of my favorite time of year, autumn. Now, I've always loved fall. I know it's kind of like the basic favorite season, but there's just so much to love about it, especially in Michigan. We have all of the changing colors, really wonderful weather. It's my favorite kind of weather. Just good smells, good foods, good fall activities, and good fall-related video games. I feel like fall has kind of become really synonymous with the cozy gaming genre, which is very true, and I adore those kinds of games as well, but there are also games that might not really fit into the cozy genre that I think are great to play around this time of the year too. But in this video, we're gonna talk about both of those kinds of games, the cozy, the not cozy, and anything in between, anything exuding those ultimate fall vibes. Yes, we're doing another seasonal vibes gaming video, whatever I'm gonna call them. I am so excited. Hi everybody, my name's Alex, aka Qualitea, and welcome back to the channel. Now, I loved doing my summer vibes gaming video back a few months ago, and I knew as soon as I was done filming that one that I wanted to do one for every season, especially fall. There are so many games that just feel like fall to me. And yeah, I love them. Now, I do want to give a disclaimer. Maybe some of these games might not feel super outwardly fall, especially in comparison to others, but these are games that just remind me of fall in very specific ways, and I'll explain why. But I want to also hear your thoughts on fall games and games that just remind you of the season, so please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Same with the last seasonal vibes video I did. My goal with this is to maybe introduce you all to some games that you haven't played or remind you of some classic seasonal favorites, just fun games to play throughout this wonderful, cozy season. Speaking of cozy, those are the games we're gonna start with. We're gonna start with the cozier side of things, and we're going to start with a classic fall-time favorite that I think even people that aren't necessarily cozy gamers, but just have been around the indie scene for a while, know of and probably have played. Night in the Woods. So Night in the Woods is kind of like a story adventure kind of game. You are playing as Mae Borowski, a little cat who is navigating her way through moving back home after spending some time at college and trying to get reacquainted with her surroundings and the people she grew up with. Throughout the beginning of the story, you kind of know that Mae has a bit of a dark backstory, but nothing is revealed too early on. This game has really incredible pacing and just a really fun story with really likable and honestly relatable characters, especially if you're in kind of that young adult age. I adore Night in the Woods. I played it for the first time while I was, I think, 19 during the fall, and it was just one of the most wonderful experiences I could have had in gaming at that point in my life. And the reason it's so fall vibey is, well, because it's absolutely undeniably set at that point in time. You kind of have it where it starts what I would assume to be the beginning of October, you have a Halloween-ish event, and then you kind of get to the point where things start to turn into winter. It's a very natural progression through the season. As the days go by, you see the colors of the trees changing, all of the fall-time construction kind of moving along, characters doing different things. It has a very natural progression that really does feel realistic given the season. Not only that, but the art style is so beautiful. It lends itself so well to telling this kind of a story and just really setting the mood. Also, the music in this game, most of the soundtrack is on like my fall Spotify playlist. I adore it. It's so good and just, again, really nice and relaxing. Like, there are moments where it's very like somber, so you have a bit more somber tunes and more like upbeat. The opening theme for the game is so good. Every time I hear it on that playlist, I'm like, yes, this is fall. This is what it feels like. This game has captured my heart as well as the hearts of so many others. And if you haven't tried it yet, you absolutely need to. Please, it's so wonderful. So I wanted to get this one out of the way. I feel like this makes almost every fall-esque cozy gaming list. But I know not all of my viewers are cozy gamers, but I think this is a game that even if you're not like cozy, I love farming sims, I love kind of like animal character situations, this is a game that I think really anybody can enjoy, so highly recommend. This next game is one that I played last Halloween, I think, and I adored it. It took me by complete surprise, but it was such a fun time. Strange Horticulture. So we're kind of still in the cozy gaming side of this list, but this game also has murder, the occult, demons, and plants. So in Strange Horticulture, you take over a plant shop, and your job is to talk with the people that need different plants and herbs, find out and help them solve their individual ailments while trying to solve the overall mystery of the town that you're stationed in. This game is so fun and so nice. There are puzzles everywhere. So if you're a big puzzle fan, like, this is a fantastic game. There are puzzles in just figuring out what plants each person wants, but also how the game is set up. You have like your desk, you have your plants, you have your window where you receive visitors, and then you also have your cat hanging out there as well, which is also very important. But as you help people, you get more and more clues that help you kind of unveil what's going on. You can go traveling across this map, and all of the descriptions of all of the places you go are so cool. While you don't really see anywhere else that you travel to on the map, you get these gorgeous descriptions about what you're seeing and what you're kind of experiencing around you. It's very D&D in that regard, and I really, really like that. But the art in this game is also wonderful. It's very stylized and very creepy, honestly. It's kind of like creepy cozy, I guess? I don't know. But then you have the map where you have these gorgeously like illustrated pictures of some of the places you're going to or some of the things you're seeing. It's so fun. It's a really honestly good mystery with multiple endings that change depending on how you handle certain situations in the game. And it's just really interesting. It takes some really wild turns that you wouldn't expect. So I think in terms of kind of the creepy and also the cozy, this is a great game for those who want something a little spookier for Halloween, but might not want to go full horror route. I don't know, this game took me by complete surprise, and I highly recommend it. It was a really, really, really fun and just interesting time. Another game that combines point and click adventure with puzzles, we have Witchwood. Witchwood came out a few years ago, and I think I played it 2 summers or falls ago. The reason this game I feel kind of fits more into the fall category is because of the color palette, which we'll get into the art in just a little bit. But in Witchwood, you wake up as this witch who has lost all of her memories. She doesn't really know how she got to where she is or what she's supposed to be doing. All of a sudden, she comes across this goat who basically tells her that she needs to find all of these different souls and exchange them to the goat so she can get her memories back. Now, each of these souls kind of exemplify some kind of moral or something like that, like don't be too greedy, or, you know, be accepting of people who are different than you, kind of stuff like that. Very, very interesting. As you go around this really colorful storybook-like world, you interact with a bunch of different characters and craft a bunch of stuff in order to get them what they want. Crafting is a huge part of this game by collecting materials in the area around you, crafting them together, exchanging them for other things. It's a lot. Sometimes it can be really hard to keep track of everything because there's just so much you can do in the game, but I thought the crafting was really well handled for the most part. You make a lot of very interesting stuff, but never anything that's too difficult to figure out. But going back to the storybook-like art that really just sells this to me as a fall game, the colors are gorgeous. You have so many pretty greens and oranges and yellows, and you're mostly traveling through a forest, which forest time walks in the fall are always my favorite, I have to say. But even the areas that aren't explicitly fall, like the beach or the mountain, they all kind of have that same feeling of being around the same time of the year, and just I don't know, it's just really, really nice. Another game with really wonderful, very soothing music. Like, there's a part of the game that's kind of all like farms and cornfields, and the music that plays there is so nice and relaxing. I really, really, really love it. But again, another really fun game if you're looking for something just kind of chill to play throughout the season. And this game's a little bit longer too, especially depending on who you talk to. If you're going to talk to everybody, try to find all of the different materials. The story is kind of meh in some regards. The overarching story, I should say. The individual kind of parts of the game where you're interacting with specific characters, that's really fun. The dialogue is really, really good. The overarching story is just kind of like, but I think some will find it interesting for sure. Now, this is the one game on this list I have not played, but I'm intending to play this October, Beacon Pines. I've known about this game for a really long time, but it was Food for Dogs who really inspired me to really jump into this one. The world seems so interesting. Speaking of storybooks, that's how this entire game is kind of played, is you're picking out words for directions within this overarching story, which I think is such a really, really cool mechanic. I really like that. Now, Beacon Pines is a narrative adventure where you are playing as Luca, a little deer who lives with his grandma after his dad passed away. So Luca and his friend Rollo stumble across some weird happenings in a warehouse, and things start to get really weird throughout Beacon Pines. And it's up to you as kind of the narrator slash story creator person. I guess I'm not entirely sure what the player's role is, but that's the vibe I'm getting. To direct the story and figure out what's going on. This is another game with multiple endings and lots of mystery and intrigue as a part of it, and I think that's really cool. I love games with replayability, and not just necessarily like, oh, you have different routes or anything like that, but just different instances of talking to characters and your choices influencing specific things. I've always been a really big fan of stuff like that, and this game seems to do that really well. Again, it's told from a storybook perspective, so all of the art in the game also looks like this beautifully painted art that you would find in kind of a more ornate book. The art also kind of exudes that same fall-like kind of feeling, fall-winter area, just very eerie, I think is the best way to describe it. And I've been looking for a game like this for a long time. Night in the Woods kind of goes there, and that's kind of what made me want to find more games like that. And I think this is gonna be it, so I'm really excited to play it this fall. And hey, if you haven't played it yet, join me this fall and also play it. I think it's gonna be a good time. Our final cozy game is probably the most stereotypical cozy game you could get, but I have my reasons as to why I'm putting this in the fall vibes list. Stardew Valley. Now, it's no surprise that Stardew Valley is as acclaimed as it is. It's one of probably the most refined farming sims out there. It has all of the things that you'd want from a standard farming sim while adding a bunch of other stuff and improving on things that we had seen in farming games before it. But the reason it makes the fall list for me is fall in Stardew Valley just, it does something to my soul. I don't know what it is. That game is already cozy all times of the year, but something about fall in Stardew Valley hits in a way that no other farming sim really can. The music in the fall in Stardew Valley, the colors, same deal, you have things that change throughout the season. It's beautiful. It's just beautiful. And I think farming sims go really, really well with the season as well, because you're always thinking produce, you know, picking up fresh produce. You're growing your own. You're growing your own in Stardew Valley. But I think one of the other reasons that it just is a fall game to me is usually the fall is when I start wanting to get back to playing Stardew. I think it is the coziness, like wanting to listen to that music, because even like all of the music in Stardew Valley is good. All of it is good, no matter what. But I think just thinking about the fall music, I'm like, oh, I want to play Stardew. I want to get a new farm. We're going to start over. We're going to get to fall, and it's going to be the coziest time ever. Either that, or I'll just go onto one of my old farms and try to like get it to fall and then just like put it on the background and chill. I don't know. Now for a super quick synopsis of Stardew Valley. You are tired of your office job and want a fresh start on life, and given the deed from your grandfather who passed away years before, you set out to Pelican Town to start your new life on a farm. And from there, you build up your farm, you build up relationships with the townsfolk, you do all these different things. I love Stardew, like really truly, when I say that, in my mind, Stardew Valley is the ultimate farming sim. It takes everything I love from the games I grew up playing and then enhances it, but doesn't enhance it in a way that like takes away from the homey nostalgia. And I think that's why Stardew will always kind of stand out as phenomenal game for me no matter what. So I love it. And yeah, I will probably be starting a new farm sometime soon. All right, cozy games, move out of the way. Let's get into some more Halloween-y kind of games, because Halloween is a very big part of the season, of course. And another very typical one that I need to mention because it's a complete staple of the season, Luigi's Mansion. Specifically, Luigi's Mansion 1. All of them are good. All of them are really good. I'm very excited for Dark Moon to come out on Switch, and 3 is phenomenal, but 1 will always be the game that is the most Halloween to me, the most of the season. And I think it has to do with the setting. So you are Luigi and you just won a house in a lottery that you didn't enter. Very, very suspicious. So Mario goes on ahead and you head into the mansion and Mario is nowhere to be found. However, what is to be found are a bunch of ghosts, a lot of toads, and a crazy scientist named Gadd. With the help of the poltergust made by Gadd, you go around the house sucking up all of the ghosts, hoping to find your brother. And I mean, you can't get more classic than haunted house. Like, that is Halloween there in a nutshell. But the thing I love the most about the original Luigi's Mansion game is how all of the main ghosts, all of the boss ghosts, have personalities and backstories. I think that's really interesting, and they didn't really bring that back too much in the later games. Like, you kind of had the bosses in 3 that had personalities, and I guess I can't really speak to 2, but I don't think so. I'm not entirely positive. But like in the first one, they had backstories and very specific characteristics, and I loved that. And all of the normal ghosts were really fun too, because they all had their own special quirks. I love the layout of Luigi's Mansion. I think the progression is really cool. You have some very normal rooms that you would see in a mansion, very abnormal rooms you would see in a mansion, like, you know, an astral observatory that actually like takes you to space. Like, that's pretty crazy. And just so much more. The controls in the game are honestly very satisfying in my opinion, but I feel that way about a lot of GameCube games because I just love the GameCube controller. Regardless, I think this game is fun, it's a blast, it's not too challenging, so even if you're somebody who's kind of not used to games like that, it's still something I think you can get into. And it's not too scary. It doesn't scare me at all, but I also have kind of a high tolerance for horror, but I think if you're somebody who's never really played a scary game before, there might be a few random silly jump scares, but it's nothing too crazy. But yeah, I'm really hoping that maybe someday we get a remaster of the first one for the Switch or whatever comes after the Switch, especially since we're getting Dark Moon. I don't know. I wish they were almost doing like a double pack, but that's a bit far-fetched of an idea. It's a great game and one I absolutely recommend playing this Halloween, or play 3. 3 is also fantastic. I really recommend it, and it's on the Switch. Next, we have another very classic Halloween-y kind of game, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. I was torn between Symphony of the Night and 4, because those are the 2 I'm most familiar with, and I've actually played 4 more recently than I've played Symphony of the Night, but I love Alucard, so I had to go with Alucard, so that's that. There's gonna be a few very pale, blondie, white-haired vampires on this list, just saying. Having come out for the PlayStation 1 and the Sega Saturn, it's a direct follow-up to its prequel, Rondo of Blood, which I actually never played, fun fact, but it takes place 4 years later. You are playing as Alucard, Dracula's Dampier son, which, just in case you don't know, a Dampier is a mix between a vampire and a human, who goes to investigate Dracula's castle after it reappears and Richter Belmont disappears. So your goal as Alucard is to destroy the castle again, and you ultimately end up facing your own father. I love Symphony of the Night. It has the best soundtrack, I think, of the Castlevania games, in my opinion. Like, it's just so iconic and so good, and so PlayStation 1. Like, it's just of that era, and I think that part is very nostalgic for me. I have a lot of memories growing up with my PlayStation 1 and playing it specifically in the fall. I don't really know why, but that's just what I really, really remember. And same kind of deal with the graphics. You have the very eerie Dracula's castle, of course, but very stylized to the PlayStation 1 graphics. I really, really love Symphony of the Night. I haven't played it actually in a few years. I thought about playing it this year for Halloween on stream, and I might still, who knows? If there's a big enough interest, I might, but it's been a long time since I've played Symphony of the Night. I adore it. It's a really, really fun game. Of course, it's your typical Castlevania fare, but I think Alucard controls really well, in my opinion, and it's slightly different than controlling a Belmont. So I just think it was a really interesting twist on the Castlevania series at that point, and one that really stuck out. Even though it wasn't super successful when it came out, which I think is really, really funny, I adore that game. I absolutely adore that game. And again, it very much so fits in with the Halloween-y vibes. You got your vampire, you got your scary castle. It fits really, really well. Another soundtrack that I would put on a Halloween playlist. And another classic from that time, Zombies Ate by Neighbors, that came out for the SNES and the Sega Genesis. Again, a game that I adore. It's one that I typically end up playing, I think, every single year, funnily enough, but I've never finished it. I've never finished Zombies Ate My Neighbors. It's very tricky for me. It's not a game I'm actually like super good at, but I love it. And it's become a staple of the times. So as the name implies, all of your neighbors have been turned into zombies, and you, as the neighborhood kid, get to go around and bash them with weird, not like probably effective in real life weapons. It's just a fun little beat 'em up where your goal is to try to get to the end of the level and collect all of these things. Like it's very typical arcade fare, and I think that's what makes it so fun. It's perfect for just short little play spurts, and you have very, very Halloween-y kind of music, like very 90s. It's very 90s Halloween. Like you're wandering around this neighborhood that just feels like a neighborhood from the 90s in the fall, like early October kind of vibe. And you go to other familiar places too, like the mall. But yeah, it can definitely be a little tricky, especially if you're not super good at these kinds of games like myself, but it's a really, really fun game to play, especially co-op. Like I really, really, really like it. Like I think it's really fun, and it has definitely earned itself a place on this list. Now, if there's one genre of games that really defines my middle school and early high school years, it would be the RPG Maker horror games. Because there's a lot. There are a lot, and they are all so different and weird and creepy in their own ways, and I was torn between two for this spot. Your Turn to Die, which is phenomenal, and I highly recommend checking it out. It's not even done yet. The game's still like in process. Or the one that I went with, and is a classic and was my introduction to the genre. In Eve, you are a little girl going to an art gallery with your parents, and after investigating some portraits, things start to get really weird, and some of the art kind of comes to life. So you're transported into this kind of alternate reality of the art gallery, and it's up to you to find out how to survive and get out of there. You end up meeting with this guy named Gary and this other little girl named Mary, and with them by your side, you start to work your way through this alternate reality art gallery. There are lots of twists and turns and lots of creepy art that's very questionable, like the creepy doll that still haunts my dreams to this day. But yeah, Eve is wonderful. It was the introduction to me to this genre. I think I found Eve late middle school, mid to late middle school is when I first tried it out, and I was hooked on RPG Maker games like this. I just think they're so interesting in what people can do and the stories that people can craft while using these RPG Maker mechanics. I absolutely love. I have a whole list of them that honestly could have made this list, but this, I had to pick Eve. It's just so good. There's nothing specifically fall or Halloween-y about it, but this game is absolutely creepy. You have to remember, you're playing as a 6-year-old who is seeing like the world as a 6-year-old. Like there are words that she doesn't know how to read. There are things she doesn't quite understand. She's just trying to make it out. Like she's just going through this whole thing. And I think that's such an interesting perspective to take. Something I've noticed is sometimes in games, you're playing as a kid, but they don't actually act like a kid. In Eve, you know you're playing somebody who is young and does not understand their situation, which adds this extra layer of fear. There's only so much you can do as a kid, so how are you going to escape this world? You don't really fight anybody, you just have to be strategic and solve puzzles and get the heck out of there. And the great thing about Eve, it's on the Switch now. It used to just be a PC download, but you can play it on the go on the Switch, and I think that is wonderful. Again, the music in this game is wonderful, very nostalgic of that time of my life, and the art, again, very eerie. It's RPG Maker art, but it's utilized in a way that is just very eerie and perfectly fitting. And I adore Eve, and I really recommend it if you haven't gotten into this genre. I feel like Eve is kind of a good entry point as well. It's not too gory, it's not too esoteric. Your goal is very straightforward while you have all of these other things happening around you. I adore Eve, I really, really do. Now, we have some games here that might not really fit into the category, but they do to me. These games, while not being deliberately fall or spooky or cozy or anything like that, have something that just remind me of the season. Now, the first is a newer game, and when I got to the opening area of this game, I knew right away This is a fall game. I'm gonna be playing this in the fall. And that is The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which is shocking because it's a game I played all throughout the summer. So you'd think I'd have those kind of summer associations with it, but no. In fact, I actually feel very similar about Breath of the Wild too, but I picked Tears of the Kingdom because of the Sky Islands, where the trees just do kind of look like fall trees. Also, I picked Tears of the Kingdom because I think it does happen at a different time of the year than Breath of the Wild. I know they're in two very different years, but still, that's kind of the feeling I get. It feels more fall in Tears of the Kingdom. For the premise, of course, you are Link and Zelda, and you're investigating this interesting cavern underneath Hyrule Castle. In it, you find a zombie who happens to be Ganondorf. Hooray, there he is. After he awakens, Link and Zelda are separated, and Link is found on the Sky Islands that suddenly appeared. Up there, you kind of go through your same kind of tutorial that you went through on the Great Plateau in Breath of the Wild, learn your mission, which is, of course, find Zelda, see where she's at, and save Hyrule once again. Now, this is a weird way to phrase this, but one of my biggest complaints about Tears of the Kingdom is how little I felt I actually was able to spend in the sky. It was such a big focus of so much of the trailers that I figured there was gonna be a lot more to do up there other than just shrine hunt, and there really wasn't for the most part, unfortunately. But that area of the game is so beautiful. It's so pretty, and like, you're so high up. The Sky Islands themselves are also gorgeous with all of the old architecture and the fall trees and the music. Oh my gosh, I can't get over it. Like, I know a lot of people aren't big fans of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom's music for the most part. I really love it. I think it's very fitting for the world that it's in. The night I picked up Tears of the Kingdom and played the first few hours, I fell asleep to that music because it was so soothing. So even just spending a little bit of time up in the Sky Islands fits those fall vibes that I think I really want this time of the year. And same deal with just wandering around Hyrule as well. There are so many pretty places in Tears of the Kingdom to just kind of sit and relax, maybe stab a bokoblin or two, you know, just fall things. While I wouldn't consider Tears of the Kingdom, or Breath of the Wild for that matter, a cozy game, there are aspects of it that are very cozy and very fitting for this time of the year. But I am interested. What do you think about that? Do you think it feels like a fall game? Does it feel like a spring game because it came out in the spring? Let me know. I'm really curious to hear other people's thoughts on this. Another big one for me that I do think feels a little bit more fall, Octopath Traveler, specifically the first one. I'm not putting the second one in this list, even though I prefer the second one, just because I think the first one, weirdly enough, in terms of the lighting and the locations you go to, fits more within the fall theme, as well as just the general environments and the characters themselves. In Octopath Traveler, you have 8 different characters that you can choose from and form your party however you want. You're able to go through all 8 stories however you want, and in the end, they kind of sort of converge with a secret ending. Each character in their story has a lot of interest in them, some a little darker than others, looking at you, Primrose, but all offer something really unique. And the battle system, I've talked about it so much on the channel that I don't know what more I can talk about it, but the battle system in Octopath Traveler is so satisfying in my opinion. You have the break and boost system, it's good turn-based combat for those who are a big fan of that, and just yeah, I love the combat in Octopath Traveler. Very, very good RPG. And something that always gets brought up when talking about Octopath Traveler and any other game by Team Asano, the art style. And that is another one of the big reasons why I think the first one fits more on the list than the second one. In Octopath 1, the colors of this game are a little bit more muted, in my opinion, regardless of where you go. One area that pops into mind specifically is the Riverside area. You have this very, like, lulling, very just nice music going on in the background, and while you know it's a bright, sunny day, the colors of the area are a lot more yellowy and like sunshiny, which I think is kind of nice. I really love the locations in this game, and of course, coinciding with the music, you just have so many different relaxing places to kind of go back and forth to, and it's so nice. It's so nice. And I think another reason I associate the first Octopath Traveler with fall is because last fall was when I was determined to finish the game, and I did, and I did. Because I had that game since launch, and had just kind of been putting it off and like incrementally working on it over time, but it wasn't until last fall where I really felt super inspired to do it. And I did, and it was really, really nice. It just felt like the game to be playing then. I definitely have an association with RPGs in the fall, which we'll talk more about that when we get to our last game on the list, but I think that just kind of helps fit it in a lot more. Of course, Octopath 2 definitely has a lot of improvements over the first one, but if you're looking for an RPG to kind of cozy up on the couch with, I definitely think the music and the colors of this one fit a little bit more with the season. Next is an RPG that doesn't really actually have anything to do with fall, but is on this list just because of my association with it with the season, and that is Dragon Quest XI-S, Echoes of an Elusive Age. I adore this game, and this was a game I started early fall, like 2 or 3 years ago. In Dragon Quest XI, you are the Luminary, who was found in a river as a baby after having escaped the attack on the kingdom of Dundrasil. And you kind of go through this whole big story. It's very standard fantasy fare. You go to try to say, hey, I'm the prince, I'm the luminary, I'm the guy, and then immediately get shut out by the rest of the world due to evil lies having been spread about you and stuff like that. You meet all of your party members, you go on this big adventure in order to clear your name, but there's also a lot of fun stuff in this game with time travel and just, I don't know, I adore Dragon Quest XI. That was a really quick synopsis, but I don't want to say too much because I think it's a story that's better experienced yourself. Yes, it is standard fantasy fare, but the characters in this game are really, I think, what makes it for me. I loved the cast of this game and how they interacted with one another and like how they related to one another. It's really nice. It's a really, really, really nice experience. So as I said, I started it in September, I think of 2021, played it all the way up until Christmas, and just having a game that encompassed that big of a time and that much of a season, I'm always gonna associate it with that. And I think, again, being an RPG, just kind of fitting in with the fantasy theming, which I always think about this time of the year, I adore it. For those who might not be too familiar with RPGs, I think Dragon Quest XI is a great entry point into the genre. It's very standard turn-based combat, and yeah, sometimes it can be a little overwhelming the more you level up, but by that point in time, you've gotten so used to the combat and traversing the world that it shouldn't really be too much of a problem. And that being said, the world in this game is beautiful. Erdrea is so nice to wander around, and you have a lot of different locations too. Like, without spoiling too much, there's one area that every time I would walk into it when I was playing, I'd kind of get a little emotional, and I love Dragon Quest XI. If I had more time, I'd replay it, but I have way too many RPGs to keep playing right now. But it's great, and I really recommend it for this time of the year. I think it's a really good game to cozy up with. And our final game of the list, which will make a lot of sense, you know, with the RPG being associated with the fall time, the vampires, all of that. And that is the game I am currently playing and cannot stop playing, Baldur's Gate 3. I never knew a game could rope me in so much. Here's the thing, I adore Dungeons and Dragons so much. I started playing in college and played for quite a while, and I adore the game so much. I love everything about Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop RPGs, but I don't get to play them enough. I don't have enough people where I live that have the time or the desire to play D&D, which breaks my heart a little bit. But the magic of Baldur's Gate is that's basically what you're doing. You're playing D&D with all of these very interesting characters, trying to figure out how to get this little tadpole that was put into your brain by a mind flayer out of your head, so that way you don't turn into a mind flayer yourself. Now, don't spoil anything for me. I'm not that far in the game. In fact, I haven't even finished Act 1, so I'm not gonna look up any more synopsis details at risk at being spoiled of something crazy, but I adore this game so far. The story is really interesting. The individual characters and their motivations are also really interesting. The voice acting's incredible, the music is incredible, the world is incredible, and I think just taking one look at the world, especially in Act 1 where I'm at, you would get the fall vibes. You're at a point where the leaves in some of the trees are kind of changing color. You've got these wide expanses of forest and then civilization, and like, it's really pretty. It's a really, really, really pretty game with very pretty characters. Namely, of course, being Astarion. He's the vampire I was alluding to. And yes, I love him. Sorry. But this game is so fun, and even if you're not a D&D person IRL, there's a way that you can experience the game without too much combat too. They have different difficulty levels, and I think that's really helpful for those who might not have played D&D in real life but want to get into the story and get into the game, and hopefully it inspired them to play D&D, as well as long-term D&D players. I'm playing right in the middle because I figured for my first run that would be kind of a good way to start. For future playthroughs, I'll probably bump it up to the higher, more battle-focused difficulty, but we'll see. All in all, this game is beyond wonderful, and I have loved every single minute playing it, even when my rolls have not been very successful. For those curious, I am playing a high elf druid, and it's actually based on kind of the last character I was using in an actual D&D campaign that I never got to finish. Kind of, very loosely based, but I wanted to give her a second chance. But this has been the perfect game for me to come home from work and light a fall candle, get wrapped up in a blanket, and just play this for hours. I think one of the reasons I associate RPGs with the fall is because of how much D&D I played during the fall in college. That's kind of when all of the campaigns would start. That'd also be where our board game kind of nights would happen too. Mostly we're in the fall. It's so cozy and so nice and so reminiscent of those times where I just had all of my friends in one area and we could just play D&D together, and it was so great. So even though I'm sitting alone in my room playing D&D, they do have multiplayer. I will say that. I just haven't done it because I want to experience the story first. Even though I'm sitting in my room experiencing this by myself, I still get those kind of warm, fuzzy feelings of the time of the year and because of the game itself. So I think that's where a lot of that association comes from. But yeah, this game is great, and I will be playing it after I finish filming this video, most definitely. That was the final game, and thus we get to the end of the video. I hope this list showed you some games that you might not have known about or haven't played yet, or just reminded you of some favorites from times gone by that you want to get back into and play for the season ahead. As I said, I love fall gaming, and I'm sure there's going to be more that I can add to this list in the future as well. But I want to know what you would put on a list like this. What games just exude fall vibes to you? Or what are games that you just typically find yourself playing in the fall? I'd love to know. And hey, if you liked this video, I mean, you can go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I'd appreciate that. And if you're not already subscribed, maybe consider subscribing. I do lots of things like this. There's a summer vibes video you could watch, or other videos that I have too that are, you know, similar energy, similar vibes. So I mean, that'd be kind of cool. But anyways, that'll do it. I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye!